In your head, medieval war looks like this. 1,000 knights in gleaming armor, sword fighting like it's the live-action version of a fantasy novel. Shields clashing, horses galloping, everyone looking like they just stepped off a Renaissance fair poster. In reality, half those guys showed up in dirty tunics, holding pitchforks, and praying they didn't die in the first 5 minutes. And most of them, they absolutely did. Because here's the truth nobody tells you. Most medieval soldiers couldn't afford armor, and if you thought that wasn't a problem, you've clearly never been hit in the chest with a warhammer. Because that thing doesn't just knock the wind out of you, it knocks the soul out of your body and sends it flying 3 counties over. Let's rewind the tape. Armor didn't show up one day looking all polished and perfect. It started like everything else in human history. Messy, desperate, and mildly flammable. Early humans figured out one thing very quick. Dying sucks. So they started strapping stuff to themselves. First, it was leather and padded cloth. Think of it as wearing a quilt and praying it stops a spear. Then came bronze, used by places like Greece and Mesopotamia. Looked great in the sun, also dented like a soda can. Then came iron, and after that, chainmail, which basically turned you into a walking metal spaghetti. Finally, by the late Middle Ages, we got the good stuff. Full plate armor. Forged to fit your body, articulated at the joints, sleek enough to make your enemies consider a career change. But it came with one serious flaw. It was absurdly expensive. We're talking more expensive than your life. Literally. Let's break it down. A full set of plate armor in the 1400s? That could cost the modern equivalent of $10,000 to $20,000. That's not a joke. That's the kind of money you'd spend on a car. A nice one. And for the average peasant, that was the equivalent of decades of income. Not years, decades. To them, buying armor was like buying a private jet. Except instead of flying to Paris, it maybe stopped you from dying a horrible death at the hands of someone richer than you. And most peasants, they couldn't even afford a breastplate. So what did they do? They got creative. They wore padded jackets, leather jerkins, maybe a piece of metal if they found one on a corpse. And sometimes, they just rolled out in their farm clothes and hoped for the best. Imagine fighting in socks and a potato sack. Now, imagine doing that against a guy in steel. Welcome to medieval Europe. So what did your average medieval soldier actually wear into battle? Start by imagining a guy in a dirty tunic, holding a rusty spear and praying the guy next to him dies first. If he was lucky, he had a gambeson, a thick, quilted jacket stuffed with linen or horsehair. Basically, a weighted blanket designed to soak up trauma. And maybe a helmet. A real helmet if he had cash. If not, a modified cooking pot with holes in it. No chainmail, no shiny plate, no armor-plated horse. Just fabric, fear, and body odor. And the helmet? That was the one piece of gear everyone wanted, because brain damage made it really hard to aim a crossbow, and harder to remember where the enemy even was. So while chest armor was nice, a helmet was essential. It was the medieval version of insurance, except instead of covering property damage, it tried to keep your skull in one piece. So who actually got the good stuff? Knights, nobles, and the lucky few backed by rich patrons. These were the guys with money, land, and years of combat training. They didn't just show up in armor, they were armor. Walking tanks, steel from head to toe. Massive horses wearing their own armor. Shields, swords, and enough gold thread in their tunics to bankrupt a village. Meanwhile, your average conscript looked like he just finished delivering bread. One guy charges into battle looking like the final boss. The other guy looks like a side quest. Guess which one gets a statue? And if you think the class divide in today's world is bad, just remember, back then, your wealth literally determined your chance of surviving a war. The rich wore protection, the poor wore memories. Let's talk survival. If you showed up without armor, your odds of making it out were lower than a medieval sanitation score. Archers would turn you into a pincushion. Cavalry would reduce your bones to jelly. And even if you dodged both of those, you still had mud, disease, hunger, and Jeff the Angry Club Guy to deal with. Because battle wasn't just about swords, it was about chaos. People slipping on blood, men screaming in languages you didn't understand, dead bodies tripping the living. And if you had no armor, you were an open wound waiting to happen. The best case scenario? You stayed behind someone who did have armor. Used their shiny metal butt as your shield. Congratulations! You are now human cover. The worst case? You're dead in the first 10 minutes. Face down in the mud while your opponent wonders if your shoes are worth stealing. Spoiler, they're not. So why do we think everyone was armored like a Final Fantasy character? Blame the movies. Blame the video games. Blame the paintings and museums. History looks cooler when everyone's shiny and heroic. When every battlefield looks like a chessboard come to life. But the truth? Medieval war was messy, unfair, and kinda stupid. The rich got protection, the poor got gravestones. And yet, we still romanticize it. We talk about chivalry, honor, glorious combat, but the guy with a rake and no pants probably didn't feel very noble when he took a lance to the chest. History remembers the knights. It forgets Geoff. Geoff had a wife, a kid, a mule. He also had a wooden pole, no shoes, and about 3 minutes of combat experience. He died immediately. Nobody wrote a song about Geoff, but there were thousands of Geoffs, and they were the backbone of every army. Not the lords, not the shining heroes, them. They fought with hope in their hearts, in zero armor on their bodies. So next time you boot up a medieval game and everyone's running around in head-to-toe steel, remember this. That's fantasy. The truth? Most medieval soldiers went to war with nothing but a gambeson, a stick, and the desperate desire not to die. They weren't elite, they weren't armored, they were just people. Poor, scared, and often forgotten. Because unless you were rich, trained, or blessed by the king himself, you didn't get armor. You got a helmet. Maybe. And a prayer. Definitely.